Welcome to the Low Red Zone Draft Show with me, Simon Clancy, my special guest, Mr. Carl Krams, as always, from A to Z Sports. How are you, Carl? Good week?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, Simon? Excited to
Yep.
hop back on. I've been itching to talk a little bit more draft. I don't have enough draft nicks in my life, so this is a healthy outlet for me.
It's exciting. Excuse me. It's exciting. You and I have just sat through we should tell our listeners, we are, if you don't know, we are Miami Dolphins fans. We've just sat through the opening press conference for our new general manager and new head coach. And I don't know about you, but I am literally ready to run through at least one more after Jeff Hafley was speaking.
Yeah, the whole sleeping under the desk thing and the grind and how he's come up through coaching. It really is an interesting case study, and I'm excited to see what kind of fruit it bears long term. Obviously, don't have expectations for super prosperous 2026, but talking about laying infrastructure and all that feeds in through the draft, right? And it's like these are the guys that help teams to have healthy infrastructure and to have sustainability. And it's part of what's kind of fueled my passion for the draft for a really long time, and the magnitude that carries in teams that stay ahead of the curve with their personnel.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Look, before we get going, you can chat to Carl and myself on our Discord. We've got a Discord channel. It's called Only Fins. If you're a Miami Dolphins fan, you're probably not going to want to join if you're a Bills fan or an Eagles fan. But if you're a Dolphins fan, you don't know about it, you can find out about it with the details on the screen right now. Right, mate, let's get into this because we had a fascinating national championship game on Monday night, Miami, Indiana. And it had some pretty big implications for the draft, nowhere more so than at the very top. What did you make, first of all, of the Raiders being there in such full force? You know, owner Mark Davis, Tom Brady, John Spytek, the general manager. Can we put now Fernando Mendoza to the Raiders as if it was ever in doubt? But can we finally put that one to bed and move on to pick 2 now?
Yeah, the draft starts at 2 this year, right? There's not really a secret to be had, and I think in a lot of years where maybe you have multiple quarterbacks, there kind of is that value in playing the game within the game and being cute about, oh, maybe we like this guy, but we do like this guy too, and just kind of keeping your options open. But when you're in the Raiders situation and you look at that division where the Broncos are in the AFC Championship game and the Chargers have 11 wins the last 2 years and the Chiefs had a down year, but they still have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, y'all got to get this spot figured out at quarterback, right? And there's one guy. And the fact that he plays for Indiana and was there on display at the national championship, and you got a chance to see when the chips were down, there were some plays made with his legs, some big time throws and moments. I thought it was interesting, kind of the game plan offensively for Indiana to mitigate what was a very clear talent advantage for the Miami Hurricanes defensive line, and kind of allow Fernando to make some decisions with ball handling and RPO structure, and let him make snap decisions after the snap. I thought that reflected well on him as a quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if you're in that division, as you mentioned, you know, whatever you think of Bo Nix, he has been fairly integral in terms of getting them to the AFC Championship. I know obviously he's not going to play in it because of the broken ankle, but, you know, that's a division with 3 teams with pretty set quarterback. And, you know, obviously it starts with Mahomes, but Justin Herbert will get Mike McDaniel this year, and we'll be interested to see how that plays out. And Nix works really well within that structure of the Sean Payton offense. And actually, what you just said there about Mendoza leads into my next question, and you kind of touched a little bit on it. But what I thought was really interesting about Monday night's performance by Fernando, in a good way, it showed him having to win a game in a way that we really haven't seen all that often, not just this season, but during his career at Cal. You know, the patience. He had to be extremely patient because what they usually rely on really wasn't working, the toughness. And I thought it showed him in a light where he was able to win a chess match game, and he had to find different keys on his keychain to unlock a really difficult defense. And to me, in many ways, that was perhaps more impressive than him throwing for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I could take or leave the passing stuff. It was look, you have the 4th down call and he uses his legs, right? Like nobody's 3 bullet points on the pros on the Mendoza scouting report are going to start with his legs, but he's got enough, and he's got this long build, but he's still a big kid, right? So like there's that toughness component to take hits where maybe you just kind of see him in passing glance and you see the long limbs and the tall frame, but there's some density there, and be able to absorb those hits. And in that moment, when the chips are down, make that play and extend and hold on to the ball the way that he did. it was a gritty game. And I like guys that have some gritty on the resume, right? Because it's the silver spoon quarterbacks that play at Alabama, and just to use Alabama as an example, but all these programs that have blue blood talent all around, right?
Yeah.
And Indiana's really not constructed that way in the first place. Now they have a lot of physically mature players because they've been so transfer portal heavy with Kirk Cignetti as the quarterback or as the head coach there. But that construction, they're not getting by on just raw talent. But I think this was a game where you saw enough of the raw talent pieces for Fernando to say, okay, like I kind of have a sense of there's enough here physically that you can get a guy that can win you games, not just a guy that's going to keep it between the lines or a guy that's going to properly execute the scheme as it's available, but struggle with the other stuff.
Yeah. I think as well, if you're Tom Brady, and I'm, again, not comparing the two in any way, shape, or form, but if you're Brady, I think you're looking at that performance specifically and thinking there are elements of the way in which I used to play the game in terms of winning a chess match, finding the different keys on my key ring to unlock a difficult defense. And I think if you're Brady, you go away from that thinking, if you weren't already thinking that, this is a kid I can win with.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I think they can. The offensive outlook with the Raiders last year was a mess with Chip Kelly. I think they'll have a great chance to kind of reassess. They probably, knowing that they're picking in the pole position and that quarterback that's coming, I think they are going to set themselves up pretty favorably to make some decisions on what that's going to look like and to give an infrastructure that can lean into his strengths a little bit. And I would expect that to be the case because it always was kind of an odd pairing with Chip and with Pete Carroll and like how that fit together. And they played like a very disjointed effort. I think they have better pieces than what they were able to kind of put on display from an individual talent versus the sum of the whole product in Las Vegas. And I think knowing that you're in that position and making this head coach / offensive coaching staff hire, I think that does give them a great chance to kind of amplify the skill set even more.
Yeah. And we talked about the toughness as well, a little bit of revenge, I suppose, maybe against Miami linebacker Wesley Bisonte for that hit last season when he was playing for Cal as he trucked him on the way to the end zone for that touchdown run. But I was impressed about how he stayed in, the shot that he took under the chin strap from Jacoby Thomas. He kind of stayed tough and wasn't really phased. And that's the thing that you read a lot. I read Bruce Feldman's piece in The Athletic in the days running up to it, talking to coaches and defensive coordinators and things who played against him and said, look, you can hit him, but you're not gonna phase him. You can pressure him, but you're not going to get him out of his rhythm. And I think that was one of the really intriguing things. I think for people who maybe don't follow college football and only watch the national championship to be able to see that, okay, there is more to this kid than just chucking touchdowns. For Miami, I think that they were almost willed to win for a certain portion of that game by two players, and that was Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, who to me were so good that not only could Indiana not get anything going because Mendoza had no time to even set his feet, but they also made some pretty good Indiana linemen. Carter Smith, the Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, looked pretty ordinary. And we talked about those guys. We talked about Bain specifically, but what were your takeaways on the performance of Bain and Mesidor in terms of how they were just able to dominate great portions of that game?
Yeah,
and how that translates.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you're hoping to see from those two guys as far as it was not guys just running up the field and running the arc. Right. It's like you get guys that have a great first step against a heavy footed offensive tackle and they terrorize opposing offenses. And you just got to start shifting some extra attention that way. But with these two guys, there was a power and a physicality element of it that allowed it to be sustainable. Even if you were trying to bring extra attention, like the blocks were just getting deconstructed so consistently and they were playing on the plus side of the line of scrimmage that's for me where you see the translatability for both guys is, you can be a speed guy who turns corners really well, but what kind of core strength and what kind of ability do you have to get your cleats in the ground when you're getting lateral pressure applied to you when you're trying to run the arc and a guy actually can't keep up with you and kind of put his hands on you. But if you're going through 315 pounds and you can press that player back and create soft angles to play through soft contact and they can't get their hands set, that is the sustainable way of playing.
Yeah.
That's what I think what you saw from both of those guys.
And I thought Bain was just so impressive in the run. I mean, this is not something new, is it? But I thought just how impressive he was, because, that is a really, it's a really hard hitting, it's a really powerful Indiana run game, and they do such a good job with it. But I thought just how he uses that heavy handedness, how he uses his leverage to win and to hold up. And then, even on that kind of on the sweep outside, where I think it was Roman Hemby who was swept outside, and he was just able to run that play down from, just breakthrough tackles and or breakthrough linemen and take him down, was just showed the range. And I did wonder over the last 48 hours with the news of Robert Saleh taking over as head coach of the Tennessee Titans, and Cam Ward certainly needs a lot of weapons on that offensive side of the ball. But if you're Robert Saleh sat at number 2, having Ruben Bain there on the board, it's a pretty nice way. Yeah, that's a pretty nice way to look at building a defense, isn't it? If you're Robert Saleh coming into the draft, I mean, because that's a guy that you'd absolutely be coveting, I think.
Yeah, and Saleh's got a really extensive track record of rotating guys, but that is a guy I think you probably make some concessions for to keep out on the field. And if you're going to deal with the defensive line rotation, the fact that Bain on passing downs has the ability to reduce inside, and you can kind of get multiple with, you think about they're different builds, but kind of like how DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead could play out on the end, but then can also play inside and rush. Like, you get that same flexibility. It's not a 1-for-1, but there's plenty of track record of guys that have that alignment diversity that I think Ruben Bain would be able to give him as well.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing about Mesidor is that I don't think he's certainly not as prolific of a run defender as Bain is. But, I was studying, I did a piece for the Low Red Zone Substack, my top 20 players. And the more I was watching him through the season, but certainly through the playoff, is that you think, okay, are his numbers being magnified by the fact that he's playing opposite Ruben Bain, right? And I just kept coming away with the sense that actually he's getting his own clean wins. It's he's not just benefiting from having a stud on the outside. And for a guy his size, he's got some bend to the outside shoulder. He can duck inside. When rushing off the edge. He's a 4-point stance guy. They line him up inside, as you just mentioned. And he's got a vast array of kind of rush, the cross chops, the club swims, the rips, the two-handed swipes. He can get to the quarterback in multiple ways. And I think, we touched on it last week, that the shoulder issues and the problems that he's had medically and his age may be an issue. But he's got the intangibles of a really good player. And I think, Combine's going to be huge for him in terms of the medical, but we're looking first round, aren't we, Akeem Mesidor, I think?
Probably, with kind of the state of this class, where you're getting a lot of guys with warts or untraditional warts, and I think it makes the taste in your mouth for the idea of a 25-year-old edge rusher in the first round is a little less bitter, knowing that you get outside the top 20 and you're looking at the names and it's like, all right, well, I really don't love this guy. This guy probably ideally is a guy that's closer to pick 45 to 50, just hypothetical. And you go through the full gamut. He plays a marquee position and does have alignment diversity in his own right. I think it's not going to take long for that kind of risk reward analysis of, well, he'll be 30 by the end of his rookie contract if we take him in the first round. Okay. Like there's sometimes that was probably part of what helped fuel Jahdae Barron sliding down a little bit last year as a 24-year-old corner, right? And you would at least think that some of these edge guys and pass rushers, some of them age more gracefully than what the corners do. Yeah. So with Barron last year, it was, ideally he's a nickel player who plays inside in a perfect world, and he'll be 29 by the end of his rookie contract. You saw a slide, but the risk versus the reward very quickly won out once you hit the 20s. I kind of expect Mesidor to kind of be that version of this player this year.
Yeah. Give me 5 good years. That's
right.
A long time, right? If you do draft him in the first round. We talked a bit last week when we kicked off the show about the quality overall of the draft. And again, you just mentioned it there. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of difference between what might be picked player 25 and player 65. But it's a good draft to fill out the middle of your roster with kind of solid players who are going to come in and play 5, 6, 7 years. Might not be superstars, but will just do a really good job. And, it was a good night. Monday night, I thought was a good night and generally a good playoff for a few of those guys who I think will be, solid middle of the roster players, whether that's, Mikael Kamara, Indiana, Keontae Scott, who had the big pick in the semifinal, Pat Coogan, the center, came over from Notre Dame, Roman Hemby, who we just talked about, Aiden Fisher, the linebacker, Lewis Moore, the safety, Kalen Black. Nobody runs harder in college football pretty much than Kalen Black, and there's Cooper, the Miami guard. There was some, everybody's kind of focused on the Baines and the Mendozas of the world, and obviously Malachi Tony is not draft eligible, but there's some good mid-range talent in that. There was some good mid-range talent in that game, wasn't there, in terms of just a few of the players will come in and do a job for a team in the NFL.
Yeah, and I'm going to scratch the itch that I know Alf is feeling off screen right now and talk a little bit about Keontae Scott, because I know that's his guy. But, man, he really is an easy player to love. And I think you can see some of the instincts and the plays that he's made, being up on the line of scrimmage in the nickel and needing that kind of reactive quickness to trigger an attack and the physicality to beat blocks and be a run support player. All the best teams in the league have some guy at nickel that, whether it's Jalen Petrie in Houston or what Taron Johnson's been in Buffalo for a really long time, as just two examples. You can even go further back than that when it was like Desmond King as a really like skill specific nickel type of player. But you have guys that are tailored to fit a certain kind of role within your defense that maybe we live in sub and he's out there and he's a 90% snap taker for us. But if we don't, when we get into this personnel grouping, or if we get 12 personnel, we know we can roll this guy out there and our run support and our coverage is not going to be compromised. Like, that's a perfect example in my mind of the kind of players that you can find in this draft that maybe are not the deluxe marquee 100% snap taker pass rusher or a lockdown perimeter corner or a game-changing wide receiver. Like, I get it. That's what you want when you have these marquee picks, but there's plenty of examples of those kinds of players, not just in this draft, but then also like across the league, the successful defenses have that kind of skill set that exists. And I think he's a great example of that from this year.
Yeah, two-time former JUCO All-American at Snow. And if you're looking at guys like this, and he's going to be 25 before the draft. I mean, he'll be 25 before before training camp. He's 2 months younger than Derek Stingley, who's just finished his 4th season in the NFL. But guys like that, when you're picking in the sort of the late day 2, early to mid day 3, somebody that's just got a really great football brain. He brings some versatility in terms of where he could potentially line up, but also he's going to be a key player on special teams.
Yep.
He's got some return juice on special teams. He led the SEC in punt return yardage in 2023. I just think, a player like that just feels like a kind of mid-round home run where, again, he's not going to be a star, but he'll just do a load of things for you, especially at that nickel position. And I think there's some good, Chandler Rivers. There's a kid at Arizona I really like, Traden Stukes. I don't know if you've got a chance to see him yet. Some pretty good nickels there. Talk to me a little bit as well about that Indiana run game, just in terms of, Hemby and Black feel like two contributors at a position that's, over the last few years has kind of been devalued a little bit. And now we've kind of seen it come back in. Both can catch the ball, both can run hard. That they might not be stars, they might not be starters, but just as rotational players in an offense, both would seem to have a future. Would you agree? Yeah,
I think so. And Hemby, I love the way in which he runs.
Yeah,
I love kind of the physique. He's got that dense build, right? He's 6 foot 210. So he's not one of these lean-bodied backs. He's kind of built like, I'll never forget when I got to the NFL Combine, and who was it? Was it Wayne Gallman? And you saw Wayne Gallman, and you saw like what his body type was and what he was listed at, and you're like, there's no way like he's got that on him, but he did have it on him. And I think Hemby's kind of built the same way. And if you told me that this ends up being a Wayne Gallman type player where he really developed in pass protection, and I think Hemby's really capable of that. I think there's still some lengths that need to be filled in, but was way better this year in Indiana, right? Like,
100%.
That's exactly the kind of role that I could see for a Hemby who's coming out as a 23. He'll turn 24 during training camp of his rookie season. So like an older player, but never really took like a ton of workload and like hasn't been run into the ground for the last 3 years as kind of a bell cow running back between his time at Maryland and Indiana. Like, that's a mid-round back that, maybe in a typical NFL draft, maybe he goes 5th, 6th round just because of positional value, that maybe goes 4 or 5 this year, right? Like I could totally see that being a pathway for Hemby and him having a productive role to fill for an offense.
Yeah. And Black just feels like the business decision for any defensive player who's going to have to tackle him, because he just runs so hard, doesn't he?
Yeah. He does not waste any steps.
He wastes nothing. He wastes nothing. Listen, it's Thursday when we're recording this. Tomorrow, Friday, is the deadline for the final tranche of underclassmen involved in the national championship to announce their intentions as to whether or not they're going to enter the draft. Yesterday, Wednesday, Markel Bell, who's Miami's kind of skyscraper of a left tackle, 6'9", 340 pounds, declared. But really, we're kind of waiting on 3 players now, aren't we? Indiana receiver Omar Cooper Jr., his teammate D'Angelo Pons, and then Miami defensive tackle Ahmad Moten, who was outstanding in the national championship. And and actually we talked about Bain and Messidor sort of dominating quarters 2 and 3. Moten pretty much dominated quarters 1 and 2 in terms of how he played until he got injured. First of all, on Bell, what's your take on him? Because he is a large human being, isn't he?
Yeah, and you go back to Senior Bowl and guys there, and I remember a guy like Zach Banner, right, who out of USC, just a monstrous mammoth player. And he never really had like breakout, but he always kind of had like roster spot opportunities, just because people that size with that length, they don't exist very often. So I think Bell's one of those guys for me that you can very clearly see there's above average movement skills relative to the stature. And he's going to be a scheme specific type of player for me that I think teams that run in between prefer to run in between the tackles, like to have in kind of wider blocking surfaces and fronts by having tight ends out there and probably multiple tight ends, and look to run gap schemes and run downhill and run duo and run inside zone. Like that for me is kind of the sweet spot for Markel Bell. I think if you're that kind of mentality of a football team, I think that's where you could pull out the best version of him, as compared to, hey, we're going to sprint off the ball in the first 3 steps. We really want to create a lot of horizontal stretch in the front. Like, because you have to be able to react and have pliability in your frame while on the run to react if somebody tries to duck inside of you, or you got to hit that landmark. And if he's a moving target, I just think there's too much mass there to reliably redirect. Yeah. But if you're a downhill running team, like I think he's a great target as a developmental player, just because of the raw traits that he has.
I did his write-up this morning. Actually, I was watching his tape this morning because subsequent to him declaring was doing it for the draft book. And this is a weird analogy in a way, but come with me on this. He blocks and moves in the way that Tyson Fury boxes, right? It shouldn't look right, and it doesn't always look pretty, but it can be devastatingly effective. And he moves in space. Like, I was watching some cut-ups of him. First of all, pancakes, which is a whole different, just destroying guys with one arm, which was just phenomenal. But then just on the move, and even in the national championship when he went out and destroyed D'Angelo Pons, he moves like Tyson Fury moves around the ring. And it was like, I was like, put some boxing gloves on this dude. And it's literally Fury. But also a couple of other interesting nuggets. Like, he was 400 pounds when he was at high school. That's why he got no offers at all. He went to Holmes Community College in Mississippi. He was 5'10" in the 8th grade. And by the time he left high school, he was 6'8". But his parents his dad's 6'2", his mum's only 5'8". But you talked about Zach Banner there. It reminds me of the Senior Bowl that you and I were both at in 21, 22 with Daniel Falele.
Yeah.
Obviously has made a decent enough career for himself inside at guard and playing some tackle as well before Roger Rosengarten was drafted with the Ravens, and some similarities there in size. What about the other 3 in terms of Cooper, Pons, and Moten? Do you think they're coming out, and what's your kind of general sense on that trio?
One other thought that just came to me: Holland Pierce from Rutgers last year is probably another very applicable name to apply to the Bell conversation. We'll see what ends up happening with Pons. He was put out as an acceptance for the senior role at the beginning of the week. I have heard some buzz that maybe not a participant, but I think that would be a welcomed addition, just because, man, he's a gamer, isn't he? He's super scrappy. He's fearless. I know from he's a great embodiment of the talking point we keep circling back to in this draft class, where 174 corners on the outside, perimeter guys usually don't, like, you get knocked for that big time. Think about what Kobe Bryant did last year out of Kansas and went undrafted, right? They were
absolutely.
Very combative. He had a great week at the Shrine, but he just fell because he was tiny. And then he got some playing time this year, and you saw the combativeness, but you also saw the size limitations that showed up. But Pons has great instincts. I think he's got great confidence, great instincts. That's a player for me that he's going to be hard in the middle rounds to say no to, just because of there's an arrogance in the way in which he plays that he doesn't have the business having because of his stature, but he still makes it work. And then you watch the Ohio State tape, right? And you see the way they win war with those two guys. It's like, okay, I think this is very easy, resume game tape to hand teams. You say, we have concerns about your size. He says, okay, here, watch the tape, and I'll take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's the same conversation that we had with Keontae Scott, isn't it? What can you do for me in terms of just being able to fulfill 3 or 4 different roles, as well as being a great kid in the building and leadership and those sorts of things. We're going to go to break. When we come back, Carl and I will talk about the Shrine game. Practices start tomorrow, so we'll be back in a sec. Welcome back to the second half of the Low Red Zone Draft Show with me, Simon Clancy, and my good friend and our special guest, Kyle Krabs from A to Z Sport. Kyle, practice begins tomorrow morning in Frisco for the Shrine Bowl, the first, I suppose, of the major all-star games, which culminates on Tuesday with the East playing the West. This game, these practices specifically, less about the game really, but often seen as kind of, or have until very recently, often seen as kind of the little brother to the Senior Bowl. But Eric Galko, the director who took over a couple of years ago, has done a great job, hasn't he, in terms of expanding the reach of the game, making it almost as big as the Senior Bowl, drawing in high caliber players. And we saw that last year with Shedeur Sanders, who obviously went there and practiced. And there was a kind of an uncomfortable and slightly strange sort of social media back and forth between him and Jim Nagy when Jim was at the Senior Bowl, which was a bit strange. But he has done, credit to Eric. He's done a great job, hasn't he, in terms of just being able to just improve the magnitude of this game.
Yeah, and very funny to watch the spat last year where I consider both Jim and Eric good friends. I've gotten to know them both very well. Eric used to work before I got full-time into football as my profession. I did personal training, and Eric worked out at the gym that I was at, and we bonded over
I never knew this.
Football at the gym, right? And Jim Nagy's been very hospitable with some of the places that I've been and come down, and I would go down in December and spot out some stuff for doing events during Senior Bowl week. And he'd have us in the Senior Bowl office, and we'd be sitting there watching tape and talking about the board that they had. So I know both of those guys very, very well. And I will give Eric all the credit in the world for understanding when he came in, he needed to kind of change the perception of the game. And I think he did that in a way in which, change is uncomfortable, right? And Eric kind of came in and did not back down and kind of went to bat for players that he and his group had a lot of conviction in to get in the building. And you've kind of seen a steady trickle where a guy this year and then 2 guys. And you mentioned Shedeur Sanders. I remember being at the Shrine last year. They had it in Denton. They had the practices in Denton where North Texas is. And I'm standing next to Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips. And I'm like, these are NFL bodies for sure. I can tell you that right off the jump, right? So they turned into pretty good rookie players as far as I'm concerned. But I look at the roster that they have this year for the Shrine. I know you're planning on talking about a couple of these guys. And I've got a healthy list of guys that I think I can see being successful NFL players, and some guys that I'm pretty excited about on this Shrine roster this year. Yeah, there's some really good names on there. When I was just jotting some down, I felt bad about the guys that I'd left off. But you got your Cade Klubniks and your Darrell Jacksons and Harold Perkins and Eli Heidenreich and Torian York, the Texas A&M linebacker, who I'm going to talk about in a sec, who I absolutely love. But Diego Pounds, the Ole Miss left tackle, and DeJaun Stribling and Skylar Bell and
Farlili Farmoa of Wake Forest, and Tyreek Sapp, and just to name but a few. But give me some of the other names that you're excited to see, that you're looking out for this week.
Yeah, I'll go off the bell with off the list of some of the names that you mentioned, and I'll mention a trio of Cincinnati kids with Dante Corleone, the defensive
You're going to go Golday, aren't you?
The Godfather, Jake Golday at linebacker. And then even Jeff Caldwell at wide receiver, I think, is a pretty intriguing skill set. I know there's some inconsistencies with the catch point there, but had a good look at some of the Cincinnati passing game when I was sitting here rooting for Brendan Sorsby to come out and be in this year's class before he hit the portal at quarterback. I think those three, that's a really good nucleus and trio of players from one program to be represented. You mentioned Tyreek Sapp, but those big-bodied end players, right? Like they always have my attention, because if you could ever just have the light bulb fully come on and it click into place, like that's a player that can be very disruptive. I would mention, who else do I have? I have Andres, the tight end from Texas. Very productive. I think it's like 1,100 career receiving yards at Texas. It's a pretty impressive receiving profile that he has. And I am a big-time sucker for Cole Wisniewski, this big safety out of Texas Tech.
Yeah, you mentioned him to me a few weeks ago, actually.
Before that was at North Dakota State.
Yeah.
And, man, you just see so many of this archetype of player that come in and they live on the second level more frequently at the NFL level. But there's a pretty healthy pipeline of these guys doing this now. And I see him as a player that if you told me he was a sub backer and a third safety, I could see him living in that world, because I think the coverage stuff.
320. I mean, this is a big human being. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not, he's a 210-pound safety that needs to bulk up. He's already there and he tackles very well. And I know that Texas Tech defense had all kinds of strong representation, and they loaded up on the NIL, right? And they made the big splash, and everybody talks about the pass rush and David Bailey, and they talk about the nose tackle, Lee Hunter, and they talk about the other pass rusher as another one of these 25-year-old guys who's out there and looks great rushing the passer. But Wisniewski's kind of the one that I thought flew under the radar out of that collection of talent that I think can be a meaning at a floor, a core 4 special teamer, and a meaningful sub-package player at the NFL level on defense.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned one of the guys. I bizarrely picked 3 linebackers. You mentioned one of them, Jake Golday of Cincinnati. He's a good player, isn't he? I mean, he aligns inside and out, but to me, I think he projects best, obviously, as a Mike. But you look at length and block avoidance and versatility, just extremely athletic, kind of off-ball guy. Played 3 years, I think, at Central Arkansas before transferring to the Bearcats, a 5th-year senior. But I mean, this is a guy that reportedly runs a 4.40, jumps 39 inches. He's been a Freaks List member, Bruce Feldman's Freaks List member, and has kind of just played all over, really. I think in 24 he was used as a Sam and a kind of an overhang defender, or even the slot in Tyson Veitz's sort of 3-3-5 scheme that the Bearcats use. Just looks good in space, a good zone cover guy, can close the distance in the run game. He's definitely a player to watch as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's this. You could say a lot of things about this year's draft class. Thin on linebackers, I do not think is one of them.
No.
I think if you're looking for off-ball guys that have some alignment versatility, Golday is just one of the names of the list. But I think it's one of the better top-to-bottom position rooms that we have in this year's class to pick from. And this extra exposure in a crowded class, these extra exposures where teams get a chance to know you and have intimate time spent with you and extra interviews, and it really can help move the needle. So I expect it to help them when it's all said and done.
Yeah, 100%. A couple of guys I'm keen on seeing. I mentioned Torian York. I just love the story, actually, as much as anything. He essentially, growing up, went to a 7-on-7 camp, and an assistant coach, he was given number 538, and he was told he was a safety and was told to move. Oh, sorry, he was a linebacker, told to move to defensive end because he had a soft core. And he took that to heart. Every single day since that day, he completes 538 sit-ups to prove that coach wrong, which immediately gets me in the room with him, right? I mean, immediately, I'm bought in, right? When coaches arrive, Texas A&M coaches arrive, Mike Elko, et cetera, 5 a.m. to school, his car is always in the parking lot. He's always running wind sprints in the dark because apparently a scouting service once said to him that he needed to improve his speed. So he's just out there running wind sprints. He is thick in the lower half. He is active. He's chunk, just good instincts. In his first 2 seasons at Texas A&M, he had 122 plays for first contact on ball carriers, which was tied for 4th most amongst FBS defenders. He's not even going to be. He's 20 at the moment. Won't turn 21 until just before training camp. And one Texas A&M coach described him to me as the most intrinsically motivated player I've ever been around. You talk about we sat and watched Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan in terms of we'd run through a wall. I'd run through a wall for this kid in terms of what he wants to do. He's a good player, and he's only going to get better given his age profile.
Yeah, and some people might get wrapped up on the size profile at 5'10", but you can hide just like running backs can hide behind offensive linemen. Yeah. You if you're reading those blocks, you can hide behind your defensive linemen, and you can show up in gaps where guys don't expect you to and make plays. And I'll say all that about the size profile and whatnot. I think we got a career missed tackle rate that's right around 10%. Yeah. Could it be a percentage or two lower? Sure. But I've seen a lot of guys that have worse missed tackle rates than this. And, I think he's really come a long way. But the other thing about him too, I think it was last year, they used him as a pressure player a pretty decent amount. Yeah. And had I think it was close to a 50% pressure rate on blitzes. So when you gave him opportunities, he made the most of them and was a disruptive player in that regard as well. Now, do I think he's the best passing down linebacker in the class? No. But if you're talking about a guy who is wired the right way to find and will an opportunity in a role, you often see who was the kid from this past year at Sean Dolac when undrafted, Buffalo right? Kid, and he kind of had this same infectious enthusiasm, and the football instincts were apparent, and he tested well. I was surprised he went undrafted despite the fact that his pro day he tested well, but then he's out there playing for the
Rams. He's played a little bit as well.
Yes, he's already found himself in a role. So nobody wants off-ball linebackers, but yet here we are, and this is where you're going to find meaningful players this year in the draft.
Yeah. And with York, to me, it's can you get to the ball carrier quicker than anybody else? Can you get, and that's what he brings. And then we talk about, 5'11". On the opposite end of the scale, 6'6" is Eric Gentry, who's the USC guy who I'm really interested to see because he is super athletic, super long arms. I think he'd be the tallest middle linebacker in the NFL if he ends up there. He is somebody a bit like Jalen Phillips of the Eagles, formerly the Dolphins, had to step away from the game, actually. He stepped away in 2024 because of what he called a number of concussions suffered in a short space of time. He's been back. He's a physical player. He can bend. He's explosive. He can explode out of his hips. He runs well. Rob Ryan said that, I've never coached a guy who can cover. I've got the quote here. Whereas I never coached a guy who can cover every tight end in the country. He can. All these tight ends like Bowers and all those who are killing people, they haven't seen Eric Gentry, which is obviously coach speak, talking his guy up.
Yeah.
The weight, he's a little bit light, 228, 229, and the medical history obviously are going to be issues. But there's some reps on tape that are pretty compelling, and I think it's an interesting week for him down in Frisco.
Yeah, and it's such a unique profile. And then you look at that and you consider he played more than 100 snaps in the slot last year. Just the fact that you've got a skill set with a size profile that can live out in that world with some level of competency is going to be the thing that's going to get him into rooms where defensive coaches are going to say, okay, what's the plan here? Maybe not everybody wants to have that player and say we have to have a tailored plan. Maybe we have too many players where we have a tailored plan for, so we don't want another one. But there will be some coaches that say, yeah, we can get in long and late downs and get them out here. And you see the length, you see the ability to play out in space. Maybe we want to be a pressure front and we want to show pressure and we want to have guys that can be mugged up and drop out or guys that can come and disrupt throwing windows. And that's the kind of player that I think can fit into a puzzle piece like that.
Yeah, he's a very good blitzer as well, isn't he? Very good. A guy that can kind of attack the line of scrimmage through the A or B gap or from off the edge. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how his week goes. That's it. We're done. Thanks for listening. You can catch Carl obviously at A to Z Sports or at Grinding the Tape on Twitter. You can catch me on my Substack, which is simply called The Low Red Zone, or I'm at Cy Clancy on Twitter. We'll be back next week where we'll review the Shrine practices. We'll find the winners and the losers and talk about, what happened, who did what, who was talking to who. And then we'll look ahead to the Senior Bowl week in Mobile. Are you going to the Senior Bowl this year?
I will be down. Yeah. So we have a massive winter storm that's going to do like 3/4 of the country that's supposed to come through Sunday into Monday.
Okay.
My flight was supposed to leave on Monday for Pensacola. So I moved my flight up. So I'm flying out on Saturday to get down there before the storm, because I think anything east of Nebraska, you're getting like snow and ice, except for the state of Florida. So I'm going to Florida, and then I'll just drive over from Pensacola. So I'll be there next week.
Be safe. Be safe. Take your microphone with you, obviously. And
I got it. Don't worry about that.
Top man. We'll get some great insights. Thanks, obviously, to Carl, as always. Alf on the controls. Thank you for watching and listening.